So Catholic theology is one insofar as it's united in the Articles of Faith. The Articles of Faith are the universal, first and only starting points for the work of theology. All of theology in any subdiscipline is the science of faith seeking understanding and the wisdom of faith. Nonetheless, within that unified whole of the one work of Catholic theology, faith seeking understanding, there are different subdisciplines, specifics within sacred theology. And these relate to the fact that within theology, there are different types of subjects we can focus upon, recognizing that all of these subdisciplines fall under and within the one unified sacred theology. And for example, one of the first and important subdisciplines of sacred theology is what's known as dogmatic theology. And this refers to the Catholic dogmas, the doctrines, the teaching of the church about who God is, who Jesus is, what the sacraments are, what does it mean for God to be the creator of all that is, what does it mean for Jesus to be the redeemer of us men and for our salvation. Dogmatic theology undertakes the work of faith-seeking understanding in light of the dogmas. And then you can also have what is known as moral theology. Again, moral theology is still theology. It's faith-seeking understanding. The difference is that moral theology seeks the understanding of faith in light of God as the ultimate origin and end, not just of reality in general, but of the human person in particular. So the moral theologian examines, what does it mean for God to be our ultimate end? What does it mean to be for the fact that God is our salvation? What does it mean that all things, including human thinking, willing, loving, and feeling, are ordered to God through the decisions that punctuate the human life? What happens when the human person begins to move towards God with deliberation, with intentionality? Here we speak about the virtues, the changes that occur in the human person by means of another important topic within moral theology, the topic of grace. What is grace? How is it that God, who is infinite and immutable, can share himself with me, a finite and mutable creature? That's what grace is, God sharing himself with us being brought up, divinized to the level of God. What is the role of law? Is law just a list of rules and prescripts and proscripts or prohibitions, or is it something that bespeaks the order of reality and the order of nature? All of these things within moral theology study God, faith, seeking understanding, but God is the end of the human person. God is the savior of the human person. And what grace, what virtue, what human action, what law means for the human life. Of course, also, if we zoom back within sacred theology and look at the distinction between faith and reason, how does reason and faith, how do they interact? How are they distinct? How do they come together? Where does philosophy, the science of reason, and theology, the science and wisdom of faith, how do they come together? This is the focus of a discipline known as fundamental theology that looks at the fundamental methods, the fundamental lights of philosophy and theology. And then, of course, you can have the experts, the theologians who engage the knowledge of God to study God in light of the sacred sources. You have biblical theology, which looks at God in light of written divine revelation. You can also have theology and theologians who study God under the aspect of how have other theologians throughout history, church history, studied God, the history of dogma. What was it about St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Bonaventure, Blessed Duns Scotus, St. Augustine? How did they study God? We can also, in the quest to know God, look at theologians with profit within sacred theology insofar as we look to them not as ends in themselves, but as instruments through which we can be better aimed in our knowledge of God. So in sum, sacred theology is one. It's a unified whole. There are not many theologies because there's one deposit of faith. There's one body of divinely revealed truths. We reason from those truths to understand within those truths what the faith implies, what the faith contains. The faith is knowable. But within the unified whole of sacred theology, it is truly possible to specialize, to focus on the dogmas, to focus on the Christian life, moral theology, to focus on theological method and its relationship to other disciplines, fundamental theology, to study divine revelation in the scriptures directly in a salvation historical, textual, critical context, biblical studies, to study the history of Catholic theology, this history of dogma, the study of church history, for example. All of these things are legitimate disciplines because all of them fall within the one coherent journey of the human person to know the truth about God, faith, seeking, understanding.